Just a reminder before today's programme that if you haven't seen the previous instalment of the Ident Review, it can still be viewed here on the channel, and in that previous episode we took a look at a whole era of idents for ITV1. Also be sure to check out the most recent episode of the Ident Review Extra, our spin-off show where we're currently looking at the BBC Two idents of the 1990s, the most recent of which we've looked at is the 30th anniversary. And now, here on AMTV, time for another instalment of the Ident Review, and this time we're heading back to a very popular channel amongst our audience, and we're looking at the most modern era of their idents. Hello, and welcome to the Ident Review, the show where we have a good look and chat about the various television idents that we have come to know and love over the years. And for this instalment, we're going to be looking at the most recent era of idents from a popular favourite, CBBC. Children's programmes had always been a staple part of the BBC, but the CBBC as we know it began in 1985, when a specific block of programming was first branded as Children's BBC. In 1997, it was first abbreviated to the title of CBBC, to which it has remained ever since to this day. Now we've taken a look at a selection of CBBC idents throughout its 35-year history before, here on the Ident Review, but this time I thought we'd go a bit more in depth into the current era that represents the channel. Beginning in 2016, with the introduction of a new, quite controversial CBBC logo, a whole host of new idents appeared on the channel. So let's take a look at the first of these, simply titled Generic. CBBC. Well, there's certainly lots going on here, isn't there? This was one of the idents from this era that I covered in my first CBBC episode, and I think back then I had a lot to criticise, especially the new logo at the time. However, with the passage of a few years, I think my opinions have changed slightly. Firstly, I do admire this ident for how bright and colourful it is. Children love seeing lots of colour, and so do adults for that matter. So seeing a constantly shifting template of colour wash over the screen is quite visually appealing. I also think it's one of those sequences that you can pause at any frame and take note of a different visual image that the logo is morphing into. It's a good idea to try and grab the attention of a young audience member. And what about the ever-controversial logo itself? Well, I do like the colour variety. Again, it keeps consistent with what we've just seen in the sequence. However, its overall design I'm still not a fan of. I get it's similar to the BBC Three logo that was introduced the same year in that it's within a perfect square, but it's still quite difficult to tell that it reads CBBC. I can tell that overall the four parts make a C, and the individual letters are showcased within them, but I think some kids, and even some adults, would struggle to see what it's trying to spell. But with all that said, let's now move on to our next sequence today, which is Backpack Drone. CBBC. An interesting ident to say the least. Whilst I understand that drones are very popular, particularly amongst children, it only makes sense to feature them in an ident for a children's channel but this kind of feels like a nothing sort of sequence. I mean, it shows what I assume would be a humorous activity, a drone flying your backpack around the place, but this doesn't really go anywhere or have any punchline. I think kids watching would be interested for a second by seeing the drone, but after the initial few seconds I think they'd stop watching because quite literally nothing is happening. I'll take some time to talk about the music, which I noticed is the same as the first sequence, and I'm predicting that might be the main track for the whole set. It's a boppy enough track, it sounds modern enough, something that kids could hum along to. However, the inclusion of different children saying the word CBBC kind of irks me. Whilst I understand it's supposed to be the children's channel, so having a kid saying the name of said channel makes sense, as that is the demographic, so far it just comes off as being really annoying, and it kind of drowns out the music, and if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather have the music. Anyhow, enough complaining, let's move on to our next ident today, Slinkys. CBBC. Ah, Slinkys, never get old, do they? This ident I feel is actually quite fun. It puts kids in a familiar setting, in this instance a school gym, and doing an activity that may be out of the ordinary, but one that completely makes sense at the same time. I tell you what, if we had gotten to do some of this crazy stuff in school, I would have been over the moon. Seeing Slinkys continuously move along a treadmill, forever staying on, is strangely satisfying and soothing to watch, and I like how on each different treadmill you have different coloured Slinkys, all coincidentally enough the colours of the CBBC logo. This must have been quite a fun one for the designers to put together and then film, and I feel it encapsulates the spirit of what CBBC is all about. So this is for sure one of my favourites. Let's head to our next ident today now, which is window walkers. CBBC. If I threw stuff at my window as a kid, I would be in so much trouble. In all fairness, this does look like a fun activity. Throwing sticky objects at a surface and seeing them stick, I mean that's timeless for a kid, and it always brings a smile. However, I wonder if some kids took this as literal and threw anything and everything at the window. Hopefully not, but you never know. The final image is quite nice, the CBBC logo made up of all the different objects. I wonder if they actually took the time to craft this for real, or if they just took the easy route out and used CGI. Had they done it for real, I doubt they would have thrown each individual one, rather each one would have been carefully placed. As an ident goes, it's fine, it's nice to see kids getting along and having fun with whatever they're doing, but similar to the drone one, aside from the final image, which is quite striking, this one doesn't really do much I feel to really hook young audiences. I'm comparing to the previous era in my head, but I think I'll save that comparison to the end. For now though, let's move along to our next sequence today, Trampoline. I won't lie, I think this one's pretty cool. It's a little bit more elaborate and detailed, and I can't help but feel that maybe this was aimed at the older side of the CBBC demographic. The kid featured looks considerably older than those we've seen so far, and the actual concept of this ident is quite nice. Jumping on a trampoline, an eternal pastime for kids of all ages, spreading various colourful powders all around. Powder flying around has always been a popular and striking visual image in many contexts, but this one no exception. And what seals the deal is how the CBBC stencil at the end shows the different colours of the logo fill the slots. It's masterfully edited and you see the colours perfectly line up, and whilst I admit some CGI would have probably been used to match this up all neatly, as trying to get powder to do what you want can be near impossible, especially on a trampoline, it is still a brilliant final image nonetheless. It's probably the best final image we've seen so far in this era for CBBC. Simple concept, timeless central focus, great use of colour and powder, and a great final image. Definitely one of the strongest examples from the entire set. But now we shall move on to our penultimate ident for today, which is known as neon lights. This is about as trippy as CBBC is going to get. In fairness, what kid doesn't love a brightly glowing light they can wave around and make interesting patterns with? I think what this era has done to some extent is to really focus on activities that resonate with their child-based demographic. Activities that kids would enjoy and find fun, and waving around neon lights is no exception. I'm surprised there is no sort of warning for those viewers who may have epilepsy, but that aside, this is just a simple and fun sequence. I like how the neon lights also form the CBBC logo, rather than the stock image of it appearing at the end. And a small detail, the child who says CBBC this time actually sounds like they're laughing and a bit out of breath. I suppose that's how a child would be after running round for hours on end. Definitely one of the stronger idents of the set. But now we shall move on to our final sequence today, and that is, quite fittingly, Bedtime Reading. CBBC. I like the subtle differences in this one. Everything about this ident is a little more calm and a little more subdued. The music sounds distinctly less obnoxious, the lighting is quite dim but also warm, and the idea of just reading before bed, even if it is the words on your bed sheets, is quite a soothing feeling to have. Again, small detail, but I like how the person who says CBBC is A, an adult, and B, sounds quieter and more soothing in tone. This perfectly represents how an adult would say goodnight to a child, or at least help them get ready for bed. And the notion of reading to a child before bed, or a child reading themselves, is again another pastime that is quite frankly eternal, and I hope never goes away. There's always something quite magical about reading before bed. How you can be taken away somewhere in your imagination before sleep is something I've always found quite relaxing, and in that sense it proves to be quite a fitting conclusion to today's roundup of sequences. Overall then, how well did the current era of idents represent CBBC? Well, I must admit, when this set first debuted, I had my misgivings. I wasn't a fan of the overall logo, and I had grown quite attached to the previous era, which had lasted for almost 10 years. The new generation does have its strengths, the focus on fun activities that children would enjoy, the bright and colourful presentation within them, and in some cases, really nice final images that show off the strengths of both the logo and the concepts. However, what I feel this set doesn't have is that sense of building excitement. The 2007 era would have different segments, some from CBBC shows, and a music track that felt like it was building to something, which it was, a very distinctive and standout visual identity, one that is still considered to be the best amongst millions of CBBC fans. But all those comparisons aside, these idents do showcase CBBC to be a place of fun, and probably most importantly, a place where children can come to escape from normal life and just have fun and a good laugh with their favourite television programmes. And so we've come to the end, but before we go, the final words from our broadcaster. That was all this week for this instalment of the Ident Review. I hope you all enjoyed watching it, and we hope that you tune in next week. Keep an eye on the community tab and the Sunday catch-up for further information about this programme, as well as others here on AMTV. But until then, have a good week, and we hope that you'll join us again soon. Good night.